For much of my life, when I had a decision to make, I started with a simple question. And the question is, what would be ideal? Not what would impress people, not what would look strongest on paper, not even what was most practical at first. I would ask myself, if I could choose freely, what would I really want? I didn't know it then, but that question was helping me listen for something deeper than strategy. It was helping me notice where my passion, my values, my natural abilities, and the people I felt called to serve might come together in one place. And that doesn't mean every decision I made was perfectly clear. It certainly does not mean I had a master plan, but one decision near the end of my PhD program taught me something I now believe is essential. An aligned career decision is not only about choosing the right opportunity, it's about deciding on the opportunity that allows the whole of who you are. And let me tell you how I began to learn that. But first, welcome back to another episode of the Leadership Purpose with Dr. Robin podcast. I'm so glad you're here and listening into the podcast. I really appreciate you. You helped us get ranked in the top 5% of all podcasts globally, according to Listen Notes. So thank you for doing that. I am Dr. Robin, and we are in a series where I have been looking back at pivotal career decisions and turning points in my career and life, one at a time. In earlier episodes, I shared decisions that taught me what misalignment can feel like. A job can look good and still not fit. Meaningful work may still be wrong for you when passion is missing or the work doesn't use the way you are uniquely wired to serve. At the time, I didn't have the language for that. I was paying attention and learning from what happened. By the point in the story I want to share today, I was living in Claremont, California, and getting closer to the end of my PhD program. I was teaching part time, working on my doctoral dissertation, and beginning to think about what might come next. Before I reached that point, though, a friend of mine in Claremont approached me with an invitation. She was directing a program for biology students at Mount St. Mary's University in Los Angeles. The students would be conducting research, and she thought it would be helpful for me to lead them through a workshop over the course of their program that will help them learn how to present their research. And she told me that she thought I would love the university and the students. She also thought it would be good for the students to experience me as a role model. And at the time, Mount St. Mary's was about 35 miles from where I lived, but I had never even heard of it. Still, I said yes. First time I drove onto the campus, I immediately noticed how beautiful it was. I remember thinking that my friend had been right. I liked the place from the beginning, but the campus was only part of what drew me in. The students delighted me because the workshop I taught continued over 6 weeks. I had a chance to get to know them. I also met staff and faculty members, and something about them stood out. They seemed connected to their work in a way that I had not seen before. I got the sense that they were not there simply to have jobs. They cared about doing their work in service of the students. Their commitment felt real, and I was impressed by that. When the summer ended and that program ended, I went back to Claremont, returned to teaching part time, and continued working on my dissertation. But Mount St. Mary stayed with me. I kept thinking about it off and on. I was thinking about the students, the people, and what the university stood for. I had loved the experience so much that summer. Before I left, I purchased a Mount St. Mary sweatshirt from the bookstore, and I wore it while I was at home working on my doctoral dissertation. At that point, I was not making a career decision or mapping out a future there. I only knew that the university stayed with me, and something about it just stayed with me. Now, several months later, as I moved closer to finishing my PhD, I began thinking more seriously about full time teaching positions. The dissertation process can make it difficult to predict exactly when you'll finish, but I believed I was close enough to start thinking about jobs. So I asked myself the question I often ask when making a decision: what would be ideal? If I could teach anywhere, where would I want to teach? The Claremont colleges were nearby, beautiful and respected, and they would have been understandable choices. So I asked myself whether I wanted to teach there, and the answer that came to me was no. The place I wanted to teach was Mount St. Mary's University. I loved the students, the experience I had during the summer, I enjoyed it, and the commitment I saw in the faculty and staff, I so appreciated. So something about the university felt right in a way I couldn't fully explain. I didn't yet understand that I was responding to a place where several important parts of who I am seemed to fit at the same time. Now, here's the decision. Once I recognized that Mount St. Mary's was the place I wanted to teach, I contacted someone I knew there and asked whether the religious studies department had any faculty positions open. He said, no, no, there's a faculty member in that department who has been talking about retiring, but he had been saying that for years and still had not retired. So she said, as far as she knew, there were no positions available. So I said, okay, I accepted that and went back to working on my dissertation. I didn't try to force anything. I didn't keep calling people. I simply returned to the work in front of me. Then, some months later, Mount St. Mary's just popped in my mind again. It was one of those thoughts that seemed to arrive without much warning. And I thought to myself, I wonder if they have any positions open. So on a random Thursday, I went to the Mount St. Mary's website and looked at the job listings. And there it was, a tenure track position in the religious studies department. My immediate thought was, that's my job. That's my job. I felt convinced that it was the position for me. And I told all my friends, that's my job. That's my job. But one of my well meaning friends asked a practical question. She said, have you applied to any other jobs? I said, no, 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 because that's my job. Then she lovingly reminded me that this was not how people normally applied for academic positions. She told me the qualities I liked in Mount St. Mary's might exist at other universities too. And her concern made sense. From a conventional job search perspective, applying to only one position was risky. And I want to be clear, I wouldn't recommend that approach as a general strategy. But at the moment, I was so focused on the fit I felt with Mount St. Mary's that I decided I would apply there first. And if it didn't work out, I would create a plan B. So I applied. I made the short list and I was invited for an in person interview. When I arrived on campus, there was a reserved parking space with my name on it. And then I saw a name of a colleague from my doctoral program on the space right next to mine. And until that moment, it had not occurred to me that I might have competition. And suddenly the fear rose up in me. Then I saw him walking toward his car after his interview, and he was wearing a nice suit and tie and looking very polished. I was so surprised that I said, wow, you look great. You clean up nicely. And we both kind of laughed. And then he left and I went into the interview. But for the first time, I was a little nervous. So I began the interview with that parking lot story and it broke the ice. Then I was able to relax. During the interview, they asked me why I wanted to work at Mount St. Mary's. And I told them that the mission of the university matched my personal mission, and I explained why. The university's mission was to empower women for leadership and to make a difference. It matched the work I wanted to do. I spoke about my research, my love of teaching, and my desire to help women find and live their purpose. Looking back, I can see that I was not trying to manufacture a connection for the interview. I was naming a connection I had already experienced, and that mattered. I had been drawn to the students. I believed in the mission. Teaching, communicating, mentoring, and building connection fit my natural abilities. And the people the university served, especially women with potential and promise, were people I felt deeply drawn to serve. At the time, I didn't organize those things into a framework or score the opportunity. I simply knew the fit was unusually strong. About 2 weeks after the interview, I received the call. They offered me the position. I had gotten my job. It felt amazing, but it also felt like recognition. The place I had been drawn to was the right fit for the work I wanted to do. Now, years later, after teaching there for several years, I began to reflect on the whole experience around that decision process. I still love the students, the mission, the commitment of the people, and working on two beautiful campuses. And what I had begun as a summer workshop became a much larger part of my life and work. And so here's what I understand now. Looking back, this decision taught me that the sharpest question is not always, what's the best job available? Sometimes the better question is, where can more of who I am be present? Before Mount St. Mary's, I'd learned from work that fit one part of me, but not another. I had experienced work that was meaningful, but didn't fully engage my passion. I had done work that allowed me to serve, but it didn't make the best use of my natural abilities. I made decisions that were responsible and understandable, but still required some part of me to remain absent from the work I was doing. This decision felt different. My passion for teaching and helping people grow was present. My values were present in the university's mission and its commitment to women in service. My natural abilities as a teacher, communicator, mentor, and connector had space to be used. And the people I felt drawn to were at the center of the work. All four parts were present. That phrase captures what I learned about decision making. Many of us are used to making decisions from one strong signal. We may choose something because it's meaningful, or because we're good at it, or because it offers security, or because other people need us. None of those considerations is wrong, but one part of you should not have to speak for the whole of you. A role can honor your values and still drain you because it doesn't fit your natural abilities. You can be highly capable in a role and still feel empty because competence is not the same as passion. You can care deeply about the people you serve and still discover that the way you are being asked to serve doesn't fit you. And something can excite you while still asking you to compromise what matters most. What I experienced with Mount St. Mary's and that decision was that a decision becomes clearer when I let every important part of who I am be present. Years later, I came to describe this decision making process as purpose maker decisions. The experience came first and the language came later. A purpose maker decision is not simply a bold decision or choice. It's a decision made by considering the fuller truth of who you are, of what gives you energy, what matters deeply to you, what you are naturally equipped to do well, who you feel drawn to serve, and how you are best able to contribute. Those questions don't replace practical questions about salary, timing, responsibilities, or stability. But what is smart and what is safe are not the only questions that matter. They are incomplete when they leave you out of the decision. More recently, I had an experience that helped me see the larger meaning of this particular decision to accept the job offer at Mount St. Mary's University. Mount St. Mary's sponsored a pilgrimage to Le Puy, France, where the Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet began their work in 1650. The sisters left the cloistered walls to serve women who had been widowed. They asked what the women needed rather than deciding for them. The women needed financial independence. So the sisters taught them to make lace, an important industry in Le Puy. That work continued and eventually expanded to the United States through schools, hospitals, and service organizations for women. Mount St. Mary's University, founded in 1929, grew out of that history and the Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet. So at the end of the pilgrimage, we visited the gravesite of one of the prominent sisters, Mother St. John Fontbonne. And the university president reminded us that we were not there for a funeral. We were there in gratitude and to think about the work we were now called to carry forward that Mother Fontbonne and the sisters started. Her message was clear. I could hear it like she said it yesterday. She said, now it's time for us to go back and do the work they started. Those words moved me. They helped me see that deciding on Mount St. Mary's was not only about finding a job I loved, it placed me inside of a longer story of serving women and supporting their growth. Now, my podcast and my upcoming book are also part of the work I feel called to do for high achieving women at a career crossroads. And I couldn't have seen that entire pattern when I first arrived on campus to lead that summer workshop. Sometimes that is what an aligned decision gives us. Not a complete map, but a place where more of who we are can begin working together. All right, so what might this mean for you? You may be facing a career decision right now that looks very different from mine. Maybe you're considering whether to stay, pursue a new role, change direction, start something on your own, or admit that your current path no longer fits. You may already be asking what is smart and what is safe. And those are responsible questions. But you may also need to ask whether the decision in front of you has room for the whole of who you are now. Does the opportunity give you energy about something you genuinely care about? Does it reflect values you can live with over time? Does it allow you to use your natural abilities? Not only the skills that you've learned through discipline, necessity, or being the person everyone can depend on, but your natural abilities. Does it connect you with people, problems, or possibilities you feel drawn to serve? Now, you may not get 4 perfect yeses. Some decisions include trade offs. The point is not to wait for a flawless opportunity. The point is to notice which parts of yourself are being included in the decision and which parts of you may be leaving out. Now, that can help you understand why an impressive option still feels wrong. It can also help you understand why a less obvious option keeps drawing your attention. The deeper question is not simply which choice looks best, it's which choice allows me to move forward without abandoning the parts of myself that matter most. You don't have to apply for only one job like I did or treat a strong sense of fit as a guarantee because it doesn't necessarily mean that it is. But you can take seriously the information that comes from your own alignment. You can let the whole of who you are have a say. All right, so now throughout this series, I've been looking back at one career decision at a time. When I was experiencing these decisions, I couldn't see how they connected. One taught me that success on paper was not enough. Another taught me that meaningful service was not enough when passion or fit was missing. This one taught me what could happen when more of who I was came together in the same decision. And although I didn't have a master plan, each decision gave me another piece of the pattern that would eventually become my purpose maker framework. So here's a question I want to leave you with. As you think about the career decision in front of you, what important part of who you are needs to be more fully present? You may not have a perfect answer today, but keep in mind clarity can begin when you stop asking only what makes sense on paper and start asking what would allow the whole of who I am to be present in this decision. All right, that's our episode for today. I'd love to hear from you what your takeaway is from this episode. Message me at LinkedIn at Robin L. Owens, PhD, or follow me there to get more content like this. I'd really love to see you there. In the meantime, we'll continue in our next episode. And this is Dr. Robin.